Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, June the 18th, 2024. The time now is 12:32 p.m. So this marks the first of the series or the playlist series, Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. Once again, this video or program which you are watching basically is the first of the series or the playlist series, Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. Now, for this, what I want to talk about is 2024, what it is shaping to be in terms of the symbolism of elections, in terms of the symbolism of quote unquote democracy or democracies. So, so far, 2024 is shaping or has been shaping to be the year of election or elections. It is said that about 64 elections are being held or will be held by the time 2024 ends. About 64 elections will be held or conducted, if you will. And it is also said that the countries that are having elections this year, their populations total about 49% of the world's population. That is tremendous. That is very much significant. Because this year we basically were supposed to have an election in Ukraine. But it is not going to be the case due to the war in Ukraine. India had just had an election, which I'm going to talk about in a future video. I couldn't talk about it because of other commitment. I was doing other videos or programs, and also because of scheduling issues. So we just had an election in South Africa. There was an election in Russia this year, and Vladimir Putin emerged as the winner. The last time I checked, he had about 80 to 86% to 90% of the vote. But then there are elections scheduled all over the world. Indonesia, Ghana is supposed to have an election. We just had an EU election, and in this election, basically the far right emerged victorious in many ways. But in terms of 2024 shaping to be a year of election, or in terms of the symbolism of democracy, which is often propagated by the West, the conceptual West, the big guy in the room, the big man, the superpower, or they say the elephant in the room, the United States, is basically scheduled to have its election in November. And there are many in this country who are basically stressing, okay, about the potential election result in the United States. Both Democrats and Republicans alike are basically stressing. There are those who are predicting or those who are propagating, celebrating the potentials of the elections in November in the United States in terms of the consequences. Now, I do not want to make prediction. However, because of the situation that Joe Biden finds himself in, he failed many times. Sometimes he seems to not even know what he's supposed to be doing or what he is scheduled to do or where he's supposed to be. He seemed to be out of his mind. Okay, he is not to himself, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. You have the situation in Ukraine, which it is very interesting that Joe Biden is being blamed, and Republicans are actually on the run with it. The situation in Ukraine is not a Joe Biden policy, it's an American policy. However, because of how American elections or political system works. Joe Biden basically got caught and he is being crucified for the war in Ukraine. But I do believe any leader, even a Republican leader, could have supported Ukraine at all costs. Because I believe it is an American policy to see a Russia that cannot challenge America, the United States, in many ways. It is an American policy to see a China that cannot challenge America or the United States in many ways. So, in this case, Joe Biden carried out an American policy and he got choked. And now Republicans are using it as a rallying cry to call him an ineffective president. But I don't think Trump would have done any better. Whether we are talking about the situation in Russia or the situation in the Middle East, okay, with Israel and Gaza or Palestine, however you want to say it. In that case, the situation with Israel is an American ally. Its strongest supporter is the United States. As much as Joe Biden is going all out to support Israel, Donald Trump and the Republicans will do no less in terms of their support for Israel. They are going to support Israel at all costs. However, it also seems very strategic for the Republicans as of now. As much as Joe Biden and the Democrats are taking the heat, the Republicans basically are not talking that much in terms of the situation with Israel. They are basically laying back. And politically, it is a smart move. What they say, give the Joe Biden and the Democrats rope to hang themselves. Because as much as the support of Israel is a Republican and a Democrat and an America thing, Joe Biden right now is getting choked. Republicans basically have to sit back and let the Democrats, okay, the Democratic voter, get so pissed off that they do not show up in November to vote. Republicans, they are known to vote. They are going to vote no matter what. I do not want to make any prediction, but because of Joe Biden, what he has been through, because of his the failure of American policy in Ukraine under Joe Biden, because of the potential failure in China over Taiwan, Joe Biden is in a terrible situation. As much as Trump basically got found guilty, of 34 counts, I do not think Trump is going to jail, because if Trump goes to jail, it is going to be a dangerous but a very significant precedent, which will be problematic for how the United States governments, particularly the United States president, to carry out their functions. So I don't think Trump is going to go to jail. And I meant to make a program about this, and I'm going to do it in the future. However, if Trump doesn't go to jail, I do believe Trump could win the election in November, because Joe Biden is in a terrible situation. Of course, I came across a poll recently, I think it was last week, that basically shows Joe Biden ahead of Donald Trump. I don't know how that is possible. Yes, the Republicans, they love their man. The Democrats, they are angry at their man. So I don't know how such poll come to being and who basically conducted such poll and what the sample of such poll is. Who makes up the sample? Because to be honest, Donald Trump seems to be in a very positive situation, because right now he's being seen by many in the U.S., especially his supporters, as a victim, giving Joe Biden what he's going through in terms of his mental state, his physical state, in terms of what's happening in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Asia, and around the world. Joe Biden is in a horrible situation, and his voters are angry. Democrats are angry. So it is very interesting. But in terms of 2024 shaping to be an election year, or the fact that it is a year of election, it is very interesting. And I think that people, around the world, especially the global south, need to take notice, need to observe very carefully. And hopefully, leaders in the global south can come up with not so much a perspective, but a strategy to deal with what 2024 could leave for the rest of the world as a result. We are seeing in Europe where the far right has basically emerged victorious in European elections. So, in the West and around the world, especially by Western leaders, okay, with Western institutions, especially those with financial means, often stress the importance of democracy as the way to go in terms of governance and all those sorts of good things, okay, in terms of the symbolism of democracy. Get out and vote. However, when the possibility that Western backed men and women will not win elections in various countries, the West basically tries as much as it can, often, to undermine the election or to rig the election. Now, 2024 is the year of elections. In that, there are, okay, scheduled for this year. By the time the year 2024 ends, we would have had about 64 elections in various countries and places or regions around the world. And it is said that all the countries that are scheduled to have elections this year, 2024, they have a population together that total about 49% of the world's people. India, okay, which is now the world's largest country in terms of population. India has recently passed China to become the world's largest country in terms of population. And India is a country that boasts a lot about being the world's largest democracy. Okay, the world's largest democracy. Now, in terms of the symbolism of democracy, okay, I would dare stress that India physically is justified to scream, to celebrate, and to boast of being the world's largest democracy. As much as the symbolism of democracy, the vote and the many people in line, and after voting, their fingers are inked, in that case, it works for India. However, I would dare ask those who are pro democratic or democracy out there, does the vote in the various countries mean that the people are going to eat? If the democracy works in terms of preserving the peace, preserving stability, preserving equality, fairness, and justice, and the people eat, so be it. I want that democracy. However, we see time after time around the world where many pro democracies advocates out there will stress, will propagate, and boast of democracy to be the way to go. Meanwhile, as much as people carry out their symbolic activities of voting, governments come to power that basically are beholden to corporations or to the big and powerful countries of the West, while their people are suffering, they are starving, they have no livelihood. So I want to stress that. Perhaps you may tell me what you think. Now, in terms of elections, Europe just had an election, and far right parties have emerged victorious in many ways in various European countries. That is a serious matter. Countries around the world in the global south need to take notice. In terms of the far right in Europe, many of these parties are stressing radicalism by an epic proportion. They are basically propagating extremism, especially when it comes to their views against people of color, Africans in Europe, okay? Others in Europe who will define themselves as colored. They basically continue to express extremism in terms of their views of Islams or Muslims. I have to say that the rest of the world, once again, need to take notice because we have countries, okay, parties, institutions in the West, which basically in the past and recently, currently, continue to push uh, radical Western interactions or actions against the rest of the world in various countries and regions around the world. People, institutions, political parties, which in the past and currently continue to advocate for Western military adventures, okay, destruction of countries and people and regions around the world, are now expressing radicalism, extremism against people from around the world who are going to Europe. But we also need to be very careful as a global community because when European countries, and I am talking in this case, countries after countries after countries, are seeing the victory of the radical elements, okay, the far right, we must be very traumatized because the far right, their ideology, and the potential of them, all of these far right countries, unifying in terms of their policies, supporting one another in terms of their misactions or illegal actions around the world, in terms of their attempt, their willingness to subjugate the world, whether explicitly or implicitly, covertly or overtly. We have to be very careful. And in terms of radicalism, we are seeing, or extremism, we are seeing that even in the United States, it was the same thing that brought Donald Trump to power. We are seeing radicalism in the UK, in France with Marine Le Pen, in Germany, Austria, Italy. If we are to assume, let's say we go to sleep and we wake up in the morning, and all of these Western countries, they are run by a far right government. Let's say the United States has Trump. In Britain, we have the Conservative Party, and the most radical elements of that party is visible and they are strong. If we have these sentiments all over Europe, that's bad. And if these elements rise without a strong left to counter them, European society, or to the greater extent, humanity globally, could be at a very, okay, or in a very serious situation. It doesn't necessarily mean we are going to see a third world war or some kind of holocaust around the world or genocide around the world or this or that. But if all of these countries, these entities, are of the far right minority and they continue to act towards the rest of the world with the level of belligerence which they've done, European countries have done for the past few years. And it is much so the case since 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, when Europe was basically hoarding vaccines, and also in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The way European leadership has acted towards the world, the rest of the world. A radical element, a far right Europe, there is a possibility that that far right Europe could be in cahoot with the United States, with the United Kingdom, and they actually could carry the war in Ukraine to continue, basically make sure the war in Ukraine continues as a means to defeat Russia and Vladimir Putin, or could basically stir up lots of things around the world. So, one important reason why I'm very concerned or suspicious of a victorious right or extreme right, far right in Europe today is because it is clearly showing to the rest of the world that Europe seems to be an empire. There seems to be like a Western conceptual Western empire emerging in the world, in which Europeans and their North American friends and families or Australians, basically, I'm talking about the conceptual West, working together. And far right or extremism doesn't necessarily mean let's go to war, but it is a form of control. It is control. The way the European right, the far right in Europe that is emerging, may not go to war around the world, may not go to war against China, may not go to war against Russia, may probably just end the war in Ukraine. However, the whole idea of a subjugated world, okay, of a far right in Europe, working in cahoot with other European, Western European countries or countries that are part of what is known as the conceptual West, to basically view or interact with the rest of humanity, the rest of the world, specifically those in the global South, in a means that basically assert European control over the rest of humanity, the global South, or as a means, okay, to basically subjugate, to control the world. It's something that we have to be very careful and we have to observe carefully, okay? Because I do believe there is a control aspect, a control perspective within the psyche, the policy of the far right in Europe and also in America. And this is one of the reasons or the things that I do believe prompt many in the West, okay, or in the United States to basically push the whole idea of Western exceptionalism. That is, we could do whatever and we should do whatever because we are the boss. Now, as much as both the right and the left in the conceptual West are the same entities, okay, of different faces, as many will say, they are two sides of the same coin. In that, no matter who is in power, whether we are talking about the far right or the left, they basically, both of them, promote a Western dominance perspective. That means the West, in this case, led by the United States, must be in total control of the rest of the world, must subjugate and dominate the rest of the world. And domination and subjugation doesn't necessarily mean let's kill everybody right now. But in terms of how they used their financial, their economic, their social, their technological means to basically keep the world in check, to promote their ideology, their policy, their perspective, while the rest of the world suffer. We have to pay attention as a global South. We have to be able to counter what could be emerging in Europe as a result of the victories of the far right. I don't know what you think, but as a person who think globally with a global perspective, a global geopolitical perspective, and by the way, I am not an expert. I'm just a man with an opinion, with a perspective on geopolitical issues or on topics or in topics relating to geopolitics. I am very concerned, and I hope the rest of the world is concerned. But please, tell me what you think. Tell me what I said wrong, what I could say to make my point strong, to get my point across, and to also improve my program or my video. But most importantly, thank you very much for watching The Echoing Voice. Peace.